One of the ways you can find out about successful people is to ask other people about them. And they've done lots and lots of surveys. For 50 years, they've been asking people around successful people if they could give any ideas or indication of why these people are successful. In fact, we've got some of our most useful information from this in terms of self-actualizing people in the research done by psychologist Abraham Maslow. One of the things that I found when I began studying successful people in my early 20s was that in the course of talking about them, people would always say, well, he or she is very well organized. He or she seems to get an awful lot done. This person is very efficient. This person is always working from a list. Whenever you talk about successful people, you find that they are very good time managers. And then suddenly it hits you, how can a person be successful if they can't manage their time? Because if you can't manage your time, you can't manage your life. And if you can't manage your life, you can't manage anything else. So I began to study time management, and I've studied time management now for 15 years. I spent thousands and thousands of dollars on the subject. I've got libraries of books. I've been to countless courses. I've listened to all the audio cassettes. I've bought and used every time planner that's ever been made with regard to time management. And I found that there is a core element in time management, and it is the element of priorities. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next few minutes. Let me point out something, though. Each of us can be likened to a factory. And let's say this is you, and this is your factory. If you've ever seen a long factory that has a production line, in one end comes raw materials, and out of the other end comes the product or service. You see this with appliances and automobiles and steel and so on. And inside the factory, they have a setup. And this is the production setup. And this production setup determines largely what comes out. If a factory wants to produce a different product, what they have to do is they have to retool or change the production setup. Now, with you, and this is your factory, we'll call this you, Inc. Major factory. It's taken you all the years of your life to set up and get this factory going. And what this factory produces is life. This factory produces your health, your happiness, your well-being, your bank account, your car. It produces your family relationships, your position in your field, your level of esteem and acceptance and respect and so on. This is what is coming out of your factory of life. Now, what's the raw material? What is it that all this is made out of? The raw material is time. And this is the most important thing to understand, is that a person who is doing better than you is not a person who is smarter than you. A person who is making more money or having a more successful life is not a person who is better than you. Nobody's better than anybody else. The only thing different is this, is their production process is different. They're using their raw material differently, and they're producing a different product. Now, the point that I'm trying to make is this, is if you're not happy with what's coming out of your factory and you own the factory, then decide to change what's coming out of the factory. The raw material stays the same, time, you have 24 fresh hours every single day. Go back into the factory and make the changes necessary to move things around, to reorganize them so that what comes out of your factory of life is more consistent with what you want. Not happy with your bank account or with your paycheck? Then go into the factory and change what's coming out. Change the way you use your time to produce the element of your life. This is very, very important. Once you understand this, suddenly everything opens up. And the key to changing this is to reorganize your priorities. Now, you'll hear me talk on a regular basis about 5 or 6 or 7 of the key R's that are affecting American business and life today. First R is reorganization, where you reorganize people and resources in a factory to get greater outputs relative to inputs. And the second R is restructuring, where you restructure the company, and then reinventing, where you take it down and build it back up again, and then re-engineering, where you analyze the process of performance and you change the order of the equipment and so on. Then you have re-evaluating and refocusing and regaining control. But all of them are built around one thing, is changing priorities. We change priorities by changing what we do first, what we do second, what we do third. All of life is a matter of choosing your order of priorities, and everything that comes out of your factory is a result of how good you are at choosing those priorities. Now here's a couple of basic rules. The ability to set priorities is the key to success. It's the key. If ever you wonder why things aren't going as well as you want in life, you must re-examine your priorities and change the order and the things that you do things, and way that you do things. Now, here are 3 key points, and these are paradigm shifters. These are ways or things that have happened to blow my mind open on this subject. First is this, is doing one thing means not doing everything else. Doing one thing means not doing, doing one thing means not doing everything else. One of the things people don't realize is that they take on assignments and they take on responsibilities and they get into certain activities and they start off on them, and they don't realize that if they decide to do this, it means that they are not deciding to do everything else that they could be doing at the time. And in most cases, the other things that they are deciding not to do are more important than the thing that they are deciding to do. This means, and it's the critical word here in setting priorities is this, is stop and think. Before you commit to an activity that consumes time, stop and think, that is this the activity that it is most important and most valuable for you to do. Now here's the second point, and it's also a major thought, at least it was for me. Every action involves a choice between what is more important and what is less important. It involves a choice between what is more versus what is less important. This means that if you decide to call on customer A, you are saying that it's more important to call on customer A than customer B. If you decide to buy car A or B, or if you're single and you decide to go out with person A or person B, you're saying that this person is more important than that person. Here's an example that's close to home. If you decide to watch television rather than to spend time talking with a member of your family, what you're saying is that the television is more important than they are. And this is not what you think or feel or mean. Yet every single time you make an action, you're making a choice. Your choice is based on what you consider to be more valuable rather than what you consider to be less valuable. And number 3, the key point here, is that setting priorities means setting posteriorities. Now, almost everybody has heard of priorities, but posteriorities are one of the most important single concepts in personal management. A priority is something that you do more of and sooner. A posteriority is something that you do less of and later, if at all. What does it mean? It means this. Before you start up something, you have to stop off something. Why? It's because just between you and I, your dance card is full. You have no spare time. You're not bored. You're not sitting around wondering what to do. If you're watching this program, it's because you're probably a very aggressive person. You want to be everything you're capable of becoming. You're a busy human being. So therefore, if you decide to do something, you're going to have to decide to stop doing something else to get the time to do it. In fact, if your boss comes to you and asks you to do something, you know what you should say? You should say, I'd love to do it. What would you like me to not do in order to do it? Setting posteriorities is the only way you can get your time under control. It's thinking through clearly what it is you are going to either diminish or stop doing altogether so that you can free up time to do things that are of greater value. And what we know is this, is that you're doing many things in your life today that were important at one time, but they're not that important today. So ask yourself this question. What is it that I could discontinue doing altogether that wouldn't really affect my life? What could I discontinue doing altogether that wouldn't affect my life? Now here's the next principle of time management, and it is the 80-20 rule. Now you've heard of the 80-20 rule. It says that if you have 10 different things to do, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 2 of those are going to be worth 80% of the list of 10. It means that 20% of what you do will account for 80% of the value. What's the big problem here? The big problem here is that people usually divide their time equally amongst the number of items and spend only 20% of their time on the 20% of activities that account for 80% of the value, and they spend 80% of their time on the 80% of the activities that only account for 20% of the value. The key to this is to practice procrastination. Now, everybody practices procrastination. Since you can't do everything at once, you've got to procrastinate on something. The key is to practice conscious, deliberate, creative procrastination and procrastinate on the 80% that only account for 20% of the value. In other words, be thinking all the time, is what I'm doing now one of the top 20% of things I could be doing? And if it's not, then procrastinate on that until you've done all the valuable things, and then you may find that there's not enough time and it doesn't matter anyway. This brings us to the next point in setting priorities, which is determining the difference between what is urgent versus what is important. Now, the way that you can tell what is urgent versus what is important is with a very simple concept, and the concept is potential consequences. Potential consequences. Something is important if it has very high, serious potential consequences, for better or for worse. For example, if you're walking across the street and a car comes racing towards you at 60 miles an hour, getting out of the way is important, because the consequences of not getting out of the way are very serious. On the other hand, if you go out for a coffee break or lunch, in fact, if you have a coffee break twice a day and you work for 40 years and you have thousands of coffee breaks and you become the finest coffee breaker in the history of the world, it will have absolutely zero consequences on your life. So coffee breaks and things like that are not important because they have no consequences. When you take a look at the urgent versus important, you get the quadrant that was developed by Stephen Covey and Roger Merrill that says that all time can be divided into 4 quadrants. There are things that are important, and there are things that are not important. So you can take everything you do and divide it up in one of these 4. There are things that are urgent, and then there are things that are not urgent. Well, if you take these 4 quadrants, then you have 4. You have 1, things that are urgent and important. You have 2, things that are important but not urgent. You have 3, you have things that are urgent but not important. And then you have things that are neither urgent nor important. Well, what do most people do? Most people spend all of their time in quadrant 1 doing the things that are both urgent and important. Those are the things that are in your face right now. These are things you've got to get done, places to go, people to see, phones ringing. If we get everything done, what we do is we give ourselves a little bit of a break and we do things that are urgent. There's people phoning, walking into the room, and so on, letters, telephone calls, but they're not important. In other words, the consequences are not significant. If we get all that done, then we go to quadrant number 4, and quadrant number 4 are things that are neither urgent nor important, and this is where we have a good time at work, get very little bit done, but what the heck, and we delude ourselves into thinking we're working. The key to high performance is to spend more time in quadrant 2. Quadrant 2 are the things that are important, but not urgent. If you do them, they have long-term potential consequences for your life. Reading a book, taking a course, making an extra call, upgrading your skills, watching this show, applying these ideas, listening to tapes in your car, all of these things can have enormous potential consequences. Spending time with your children when they're growing up is one of the most important things that you can do because of the long-term potential consequences for their personality development and their character in life. So think about these things. People who are successful are always thinking what is important versus what is urgent. And this brings us to one of the simplest ways to set priorities, what I call the ABCDE method. The ABCDE method is very simple. If you make a list of the things that you have to do, that's the starting point, before you begin, you go through the list and you put an A, B, C, D, or E next to each item. An A is something that you must do. Something that you must do has serious consequences. If you don't do it, it's serious. There's going to be a price to pay. People are going to be unhappy. It may affect your life or your career. These are the things that must be done before anything else. B are things that you should do. These are things that have mild consequences. If you don't do them, people are going to be affected, they'll be unhappy, they'll be inconvenienced, but they're not as important as B. Rule is this, is always do your A's before you do your B's, always do your B's before you do your C's. Your C items are the things that are nice to do. These are things with no consequences. Now, there are many things that we do during the course of the day that have no consequences. Doesn't matter if we do them or not. And number D is delegate. Now, delegate is important because you should delegate 100% of everything that you possibly can if you're ever going to have enough time to do the things you need to do. Let me point out something that's very important. As your career evolves, at the beginning, you start off doing everything yourself. You wash your own dishes, you mow your own lawn, you wash your own car, you do your own house cleaning, you iron your own shirts, and so on. As you become older and more experienced, as you make more money, you can no longer do a lot of these things. I had a woman in my course recently who came to me and she said, Brian, she said, I'm doing very, very successful in residential real estate. And things are going wonderfully well, but I feel really guilty because I want to be at home and I want to make sure that my house is well taken care of and that I make dinner for my family and so on, and I don't know how to take care of the pressures of both a growing family and my real estate. I said, Madam, you've made a mistake in that you are still in the mindset of doing these things. You are no longer a laborer, you are now management, Your job is not to do these things, but to get them done. Now, I point this out because almost everybody I know is in the position of having things in their lives that your job is to make sure that they are done properly, management task, not to do them yourself. In fact, it may very well be that you can no longer afford to mow your lawn, you can no longer afford to wash your car, you can no longer afford to clean your own house. Your job is to get them done by others, not to do them yourself. Now, the next letter is the letter E, which stands for eliminate, which goes back to setting posteriorities. Eliminate means get everything out of your life that you possibly can. Ask yourself, how important is this? What if I never did it again? What would it matter? I did a talk for a $100 million company not long ago. And the head of the company, the president, was a woman, a very, very smart woman. And when I said this to her, she almost fell off her chair. And she wrote to me later a very interesting letter. And what it said was this. She said, because she's the president of such a large company, she has been invited and given a prestigious position on a whole series of boards and councils and committees and associations and foundations and charities. And she has 2 young children. She found herself spending night after night. She was out sometimes 5 nights a week, out on weekends, going to these various functions, serving on these boards, fulfilling her social responsibility. When we went through this, you know what she found? She found that all of these things that she were doing were important, but they weren't that important to her. Her children were more important to her. And she wrote to me that she'd gone back, and out of 13 boards, committees, and associations, she resigned from 11. She only kept 2, and she made a decision that she would not be away more than 2 nights per week while her children were growing up. She said it gave her complete control over her life. She's felt better than she had felt for years. Think about that and how it might apply to you. What are some of the things that you can do that you can get rid of, get out of your life, eliminate altogether so that you can free up time for what's really important to you? And you know, physical fitness is a very valid choice. Spending time with your children is a very valid choice. Spending time with your spouse is an absolutely critical choice. And what are the other things you're doing? Are they more important than this? And if they're not, get rid of them. Now, this brings me to my 3 favorite questions. I call these focus questions in setting priorities, and they're based on what we call the law of forced efficiency. Now, the law of forced efficiency is a cute little law that simply says this, is there's never enough time to do everything, but there's enough time to do the most important things. And so you have to always be asking yourself, what are the most important things? What are the things that if push comes to shove, then I am forced to do them? And the key to great success in managing your time and setting priorities is, of course, is to do those things before they become crises. All right, here's number 1 question. What are your highest value activities? What are your highest value activities? Sit down and think, what are the things that you do that contribute the most value to your life? When I'm at my work, I always ask, what is the highest value activity I have in terms of financial contribution? When I'm at home, I say, what is the highest value activity I have in terms of making sure that my family is happy and well-balanced and has what they need? In every stage of your life, you have to ask yourself, what are my highest value activities? What are the activities that I engage in that yield me the greatest payoff in this area of endeavor? And then do those before you do anything else. Number 2 is ask yourself, well, what are my key result areas? What are the results that I have to get? These are key areas. What are the results that I have to get at my work in order to justify my paycheck, in order to continue growing in my career? What are your key result areas? If you're not sure about this, it's impossible for you to perform at your best. It's impossible to be promoted. It's impossible to make more money. You've got to know what they are, and the 80-20 rule applies. 20% of what you do is more important than everything else in determining your future. Whatever they are, work on those exclusively until they're done. These are your A tasks. Now, number 3, why are you on the payroll? Why are you on the payroll? Now, this seems like a logical question, but you know what? Most people, including senior executives, are not sure of the answer. Why are you on the payroll? If your child were to come to you and say, Mommy, Daddy, why do they pay you money down there? What would your answer be in 10 words or less? In other words, what results do you give for the money that you get back? And if you're not sure about this, by the way, here's one of the best techniques I've ever learned. Go to your boss with a list of everything that you think you've been hired to do. Give the list to your boss and say, Boss, I want to be sure that I'm working on what you consider to be the most valuable use of my time. Would you please organize this list in order of priority? From then on, work on what your boss considers to be your highest priority, and the rest of your work life will be dandy. Your career will be largely assured. All of your problems will come when you are not working on or doing a good job on what your boss considers to be your highest priority. So why are you on the payroll? Why are you on the payroll? And number 4 is ask yourself this question, one of the most important of all. What one thing can you and only you do that if done well will make a real difference? What one thing can you and only you do that if done well will make a real difference? You see, there's only one answer to this question. At any given time, when you think about it, there's only one answer to this question. When you say, what can I and only I do that if done well will make a real difference, you'll find that at every hour, every day, every week, even in the course of your job, there's one thing that only you can do. If you don't do it, nobody else can do it. Your unique skills, your position, your background, your past, your authority enables you to do it just right. And if you do it, it'll make a real difference in your job. It'll make a real difference in your career. It may make a real difference in your life. At home with your family, it's the same thing. What can I and only I do that if done well will make a real difference? And then almost always the answer to that is you can spend more time with the important people in your life. Well, we know that the most successful men and women in America are those who answer all of these questions. They're intensely result-oriented. They're always asking themselves, what results are expected of me? What am I supposed to accomplish? What do I get paid for? What results of all the results that I can accomplish are going to pay the very most or be the very most helpful for me to get? In fact, you could make an equal sign. You could say my rewards equal my results. And if you want to increase your rewards, you increase your results. So let me give you the last question in time management, the most important of all. It is the organizing question that will change your life. And the question is this, let me draw a line over here so we use this whole board, is always be asking every hour of every day, what is the most valuable use of my time right now? What is the most valuable use of my time right now? The most valuable use of my time right now. This is the most important single question in time management. In study after study, starting with Andrew Carnegie back in the last century, up into this century, what we have found is that the ability to concentrate single-mindedly on one thing, the most important thing, and to stay with it till it's done, is the key to great success. Is that no great success is possible without single-minded concentration. And single-minded concentration is not possible without the ability to concentrate. Concentration is the most important discipline for you to learn and for you to teach. But I can promise you this, is that if you make a habit of practicing single-minded concentration on the one thing, the thing that makes a real difference, the most valuable use of your time, and you stay on that every minute of every day, you'll achieve more in the next few weeks and months and years than most people accomplish in a lifetime.